as a person online who talks about books and I have been slowly working my way through some of these top 10 lists, there comes a point in time where you have to talk about the top 10 greatest book series of all time, at least that I've read. Anyway, here we go. Another top 10 list. And I kind of just keep working my way through these because, in all honesty, I've just been having an absolute blast making them. And if you're going to do something, it might as well be fun, right? Anyway, rules. There's always rules to this. This is a book series video, so it has to be at least a trilogy or more in order to qualify as a series of books for this video. Also, I have to have completed the entire run of the series. I can't be somewhere in the middle of it, except for one. There is one exception on this list that literally just dawned on me, and I'm not going to change it because I refuse. But no, for the most part, I shouldn't be in the middle of the series somewhere. I should have completed it with one major asterisk, and that's about it. I have to have finished it, and it has to be at least 3 books long in order to qualify. Now, if there's anything this video has taught me, it is 2 things. It is, 1, I have read more than enough series in order to do this video, and 2, I have a really bad habit of starting series, reading my first 1, 2, or 3 books, and then just going, ooh, like jangly keys over here, seeing another book and starting that series, and then never finishing them. I realized I have a lot of series that I'm just somewhere in the middle of that might one day make this list, but I haven't finished them yet. Like, I'm literally like right in the middle of the Ring books and, oh my God, let's see. Murderbot, Revelation Space, Altered Carbon, Neuromancer, The Asian Saga by, what's his name, Clavel. And I'm sure I'm missing some. It doesn't really matter. It's not even important, but there's a lot of shit that I need to get on reading and get it done. If I do this list next year, this list might look very different. That's assuming I actually finish those series. And I might just start some more and then not finish those. Anyway, let's stop wasting time here. The top 10 book series of all time that I have read. And it starts with number 10, Wayward Pines. And the Wayward Pines trilogy is a is a series of 3 books by Blake Crouch. And it barely made it onto this list. Honestly, the number 10 spot was between Wayward Pines and Annihilation. And the only reason Annihilation didn't make it onto the list is because I think the 3rd book in that series kind of took a real dip in quality, and it wasn't that great. Wayward Pines, on the other hand, all 3 books are extremely consistent. It is a breakneck-paced thriller about a man who wakes up in a town and he doesn't know who he is or where he is or how he got there, and the town is surrounded by a fence. But is the fence there to keep the people in or something else out? What is going on? Why is this town so strange? It feels like an episode of The Twilight Zone in book form, but it is blisteringly fast-paced. All 3 of them, from the start to the finish. It is actually, I think that's kind of what he's known for, because I've read one other Blake Crouch book, which is Dark Matter, and it was pretty much the exact same thing. Very well written, very well done, very well executed. It, as far as my money goes and my opinion is concerned, it doesn't make it further onto this list because I'm not a thriller reader. The whole time I was reading this, actually, to be quite honest, I kept thinking, gosh, this would make a great movie or a great TV show. I know it was made into a TV show. I've never seen it, but it just felt like, yeah, I can see why this was made into a show, because it feels like, as you're reading it, you're like, this feels like a really good TV show. Maybe not books. I don't know. I'm just not a thriller reader, even though it's on the list of greatest books series of all time. I'm just saying it's the only reason it's not higher on the list is because I'm much more of a science fiction and horror reader than a thriller reader. But if thrillers are your thing, holy shit, check out some Blake Crouch, because I don't think you will be disappointed. Moving on to number 9, The Strain trilogy by Guillermo del Toro and Chuck Hogan. And this actually made it onto my top 10 horror books of all time because it's just that good. But it probably belongs here a little bit better because it is a full trilogy. And it is just wonderful. It is a whole different take on the idea of a vampire. If you haven't seen The Strain show or read The Strain book, it is about these vampires that break out in an airport and then they slowly just start to take over the entire world. But it is not vampires in the sense of sparkly Twilight vampires. No, these things are horrific creatures with these like 6-foot long appendages, essentially a tongue, that will stab and suck on you and then put these worms inside of you. Then you become a vampire, and they are like mindless drones, and they're kind of like a hive mind. It is wonderful. It's great. It's just, the whole thing's great. But being that it came from the mind of Guillermo del Toro, that really gives you an idea of what to expect, at least as far as like tone and what the story's going to do as it works its way through it, and the kind of style of horror and the style of creature that you will end up with in the book, because it is very much Guillermo del Toro. Number 8 is the Ender Saga. I just actually made a video on this as well. I just recently finished this, as a matter of fact. I actually just recently finished another book series that also appears later on in this list. But anyway, Ender Saga is a series of books following Ender, starting with Ender's Game, by far the most popular book. And it starts off, he will be taken as a child and trained to be one of the greatest army commanders there is. He will single-handedly basically win a war with another species, ending up causing genocide, and then the book series go on from there to really open up and to spread out and to explore ideas of speaking for the dead and what makes people good or bad, or what defines people and who they are. Then it will expand even further onto more species and how do species get along, and then viruses and diseases come into play. Who's worth saving? Is anyone worth saving, and why? Then it's going to go even bonkers into some ideas about humans, humanity, the soul, the spirit. What is human? It's wild. It gets into a lot of stuff, and and it's a good old-fashioned style science fiction, like old classic sci-fi, where you get into like ideas. Like you pick up the book, and the more you read the book, you're like, oh, he had an idea that he wanted to explore, and he kind of tacked the Ender characters onto that idea and used them as just a vehicle for him to discuss something else that he really wanted to talk about. And each book, when you get to it, you really can see there's a core idea that he's really talking about, and Ender and crew are really just there to help him talk about this other thing. And that's great. That's actually one of the things I love about classic sci-fi, is it was way more about ideas than it was about maybe plot lines and characters. But this also has some great characters mixed into it that you really enjoy following and reading throughout. So it feels like a good mix of classic sci-fi and a little bit more modern character-driven sci-fi. Number 7 is Vampire Hunter D. Now this is the one that I realized in the intro I actually haven't finished. But in my defense, this is like 30, 40, 50 books. I don't know how many it is, but there's way too many of these. And they're really just like a monster of the week. They do not have a real continuity that you follow. And I don't think it's 100% necessary to have finished the series for me to even include it on this list. I feel perfectly fine including this one with that big asterisk that it doesn't actually adhere to the rules that I set out for myself to follow. Anyway, Vampire Hunter D. Now this, in all honesty, should not be this high on the list. If you've ever read one, you're probably looking at the screen a little sideways right now going, what the fuck are you even doing? But I couldn't help it. I love them so much. I just enjoy them so much. If you've read one, like I said, it probably shouldn't be this high on the list. Why? Well, they're just not written well. They're super awkward. They're very clunky. The dialogue and the narrative and the narration, the wording is just so weird. They're just not written well. I don't think anybody who's ever read them is going to argue that they're well-written books, but they are so enjoyable to read. It's just insane. It is like this post-apocalyptic world. The world was destroyed, then the world was taken over by vampires. Then the world was elevated to the point of like ultra sci-fi, high-tech everything. Now that world's collapsed into ruin, and we are now live in this world of an Old West style, I don't know, vampires rule everything, but there's this hunter named D, and he might be super important, but we don't know, and he just might be the ultimate, most powerful being that's ever been in the entire face of existence, and he goes through just tearing through everything, and each one exists in its own little bubble, and it tells the story of him versus a vampire, or him versus some spellcaster, or him versus God knows what. And sometimes he's almost like a backseat character in his story because other people take the forefront. But each one of them is just so deliciously fascinating. I love them so very much. And if I'm ever like just finish a book and I'm like, man, I just need something that I can read very quickly and just love every second of it and just have a very, very good time, I'm going to grab Vampire Hunter D. It is what I call a palate cleanser book, and it is currently my favorite palate cleansing book. Number 6, The Three Body Problem. This is one I must say thank you to BookTube, because if it were not for BookTube, I would not even know that this book existed. And BookTube has bitten me in the past where I've been like, oh, that looks great, and I go rush out and I buy this book and it's not great. I don't know why BookTube's all excited about it. I'm looking at you, Murderbot, and you, The Expanse. I know I did do actually videos on all of the Expanse books, and actually I think they all rated between a number 5 and a number 7 on the rating boards. They're all leaned into the positive, but all in all, it was pretty mid experience, which is fine. It were good. Like I said, a 5, 6, 7 is a good on a book, but when you're getting into a series that long, like 9 books, we're talking, I really hope it's better than a 6. Anyway, The Three Body Problem is boy, what do you say? It is a science fiction trilogy written by Zhijin Liu, who is a Chinese author, and it was written in Chinese, translated into English. I hear a lot of people complain about it, like, oh my gosh, because it's hard sci-fi, so it leans really hard into the science of the fiction, and it's not character-driven, not character-focused at all. People complain about these paper-thin characters, but you know me, I'm a huge fan of classic science fiction, which that's all ideas-driven, and every book in classic sci-fi has paper-thin characters. So, to me, reading it just felt like science fiction to me. But anyway, no, it is like a first contact book. But what if, when we had first contact with the aliens, what if by the time we contacted them and had that first contact, what if we were already f***ed? And then where do we go from there? Can we go anywhere from there? Maybe not, And then it travels through time. It really tackles this situation over the course of hundreds of years, following multiple characters throughout the 3 books. It was fascinating. I really liked it. I liked the ideas of it. I'm not 100% sold on the idea of the Dark Forest. I thought that was a little odd. I'm not sure I 100% agree with where he was going with some of his ideas, I guess is what I'm saying. But just that doesn't take away from just the sheer brute force of the ideas and the sheer volume of the ideas, especially by the time you get to book 3, you're like, dude, you are like, take a breath, but it was great. It was really good. It was fabulous. And it's really, really fascinating seeing it from the perspective of a completely different culture, because you can feel the influence of that culture in the book. I don't want to say that I understood any of the metaphors or any of the allegory or any of that crap, but you can definitely feel that this wasn't written by somebody from our particular culture. It has a different perspective on aliens and contact and everything, to be quite honest. Number 5, Valis. The Valis Trilogy by Philip K. Dick. Philip K. Dick is a science fiction author from the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, I guess, that was just massively influential. He was the author of the book that inspired Blade Runner. He was the author of the book that inspired Total Recall. He was the author of the book that inspired Minority Report. I think he's had about a dozen movies made based off of his books and short stories. There's a very good chance that you've watched a movie based off of a Philip K. Dick story and you just didn't know it. Valis is his trilogy of books, very loosely connected, not by plot, characters, or story, but by ideas. He took these 3 books to meditate on existence, the nature of existence, all of reality, and most importantly, religion and God. And which was kind of outside of his primary wheelhouse. He was mostly science fiction. And when he got to Valis, he was like, let's really blend this with my thoughts on religion and God. And that includes all religions, not just one, and he really kind of melds and weaves them together into some master thesis while doing it within like the first book, which is Valis, which is a story about a main character who's also schizophrenic, who has conversations with himself, who also believes that at one point in time he communicated with or was shot with a beam from God, and then follows him as he spirals into and out of madness and has moments of lucidity and then moments of definite not. And then it moves on to the second one, which is the Divine Invasion, which is kind of like, what if God was exiled to a foreign solar system back 2,000 years ago by Belial, and now the second coming of Jesus is going to hop on a spaceship and come back to planet Earth 2,000 years later, as in the Divine Invasion. And then the third book, which is The Transmigration of Timothy Archer, which is by far the weakest of all the 3 books. And I almost struggled with the idea of putting this on this list because the third book is so weak. Kind of the same problem I had with Annihilation. But I just couldn't help myself. It has to go on here. The quality and how much I love Valis alone, the first book in that trilogy, drags it all the way up to number 5 on this list. It is that good of a book, and I loved reading it that much. Although, if you are interested in reading it, I might go check out my video on it first, because it is not for everybody, we'll just say that. Now, number 4 is 1Q84. Now, this almost feels like a cheat too, because in the United States, this is sold as a single book. But actually, it was originally written as 3 books, and it was originally published in Japan as 3 books. So it was only when we brought it over to the States and translated it for the United States audience that it was put in this like bind up and released as a single book. So it is technically a trilogy, and I'm going to, for the purposes of this list, going to consider it a trilogy because damn it, I want it on this list. It is that good of a book. This is the book that I read, the very first Haruki Murakami book that I've ever read, and I immediately gave him a shelf on my bookshelf because I was just that fascinated and enthralled by this book. I have since read like half a dozen of his books, and they are all wonderful. This one is a story of a man and a woman, and they are alternating between one chapter to the next. You follow her, then you follow him, and their stories have absolutely nothing to do with each other, but are intrinsically intertwined from page 1 to the very end of the book. And you're like, they might overcross at some point, but they might not. But how are they connected? Why are they connected? There is parallel universes involved, but you're not sure which one you're in or where you're at. And if you switch from one to the next, you're not sure when and where and how, because it's not defined how the transition works, or even when, or even if the transition exists. This Haruki Murakami deals in surrealism, magical realism, and what's the other one? I think it's considered postmodern or something like that. But when I say he's leans into the surrealism, this is real surrealism, true surrealism. Like, you don't necessarily know where you are or what's happening from one moment to the next. And this is a little bit more grounded than some of his other ones, like, say, Kafka on the Shore, which is, woo, that's the author described that one as a book of puzzles where I don't give you the answers. So if that tells you anything about the writing style of Haruki Murakami. Yeah, but what I was saying, it's not like surrealism in the sense of like, ooh, Neil Gaiman, isn't this surreal? Now Neil Gaiman's like got his dipping his toes into the waters of surrealism. This guy dives into the deep end. Anyway, so in that sense, I would say that this is another book, maybe not for everybody, but it's just so wonderful that I can't help but love every single second of it. As a matter of fact, the more I get into this video and talking about my top 10 books of all time, the more I realize just might not be for everyone. Is maybe something I could say about everything I like. I like some weird shit, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm a very different person. I'm special and unique snowflake. Anyway, that didn't sound right, did it? It sounded like snowflake makes me sound like I'm delicate or something. Anyway, okay, so now here we are down to the top 3. And if I'm being 100% honest, this is the reason why I wanted to make this video, is because of these 3 book series. These 3 book series are the greatest book series of all time that I could possibly imagine. I can see myself making this video for the next 15 years, every single year, to update this list, and I do not see these 3 book series ever leaving the top 3. I will see as time goes on and I read more books, because there's one on this top 3 that's brand new. I literally just finished it. So never say never, I guess is what I'm saying. But the greatness of these 3 book series, I find it very difficult to believe that they will ever come off of this position. And I really, really, really wanted to talk about them. Number 3 being the one that I just finished and being the most recent of all of them, The Book of the New Sun, which is The Shadow of the Torturer, Claw of the Conciliator, Sword of the Lictor, and Citadel of the Autarch. And they just blew my absolute ever-loving mind. It is a book of, like, far-flung in the future, but we're to the point where we had technology where we spanned planets and galaxies, and then all of that crumbles and disintegrates, and now we're stuck on a planet with a dying Earth, and the Earth is dimming. So it's a futuristic science fiction book, but it's written in the style of a fantasy. But it's written so much so in the style of a fantasy that it's written like Swords and Sorcery. And he will be living in, say, a tower, which is basically a spaceship. And he will describe it for chapters on end before you realize, oh, this isn't a real tower. This is like a spaceship. This is an old broken down shuttle or something that he's living in, but he doesn't know how to describe it. So he describes it in the only words and language that he has available to him, which is this high fantasy way of describing things. And he could be describing something that you would recognize in an instant, but Severian, our main character, doesn't know what it is and doesn't know how to describe it to you. And there is spaceships and there is laser guns and there's all these things, but it's, oh my gosh. And it's written in the style of, like, say, he wrote this manuscript and then he left it behind and then this manuscript was found and then the manuscript was translated, but he wrote it at the end of his life about the beginning of his life, but he might be a liar, but he might have perfect memory. It's crazy, it's wild, and on top of that, it's one of the most dense books you are going to read. It's like everything's about 3, 4, 5 times removed from you, the reader, and then it's done through like just foggy glass. I've gotten so many different analogies over the videos that I've made of this. I think I originally called it trying to see the world through the lens of a kaleidoscope. I forget. And technically, now I do want to say this, technically this might actually be a better series than the next two that come on this list, because I would give all four of these books an absolute 10 out of 10 ranking, whereas the next two series do not have that same level of quality. I don't think all of these next books are 10s like I do this one. This one might technically be better than the ones that come after it, but I just finished this, and maybe after I sit on it for longer periods of time, it might move up in the list. But as of right now, it's got to go on to 3 because of the time that I've spent with the other ones, the time that I have lived with and loved them for so long, and what they mean to me as a reader just outshines this one as of now. Because I said in a video I just did like last month that I wouldn't change a single word of this. I think some of it is that perfect. But that's another one that's not for everybody. Reader beware. The number 2 greatest book series of all time, and I find this one quite hard to dispute, is Dune. It's just, what is there that can be said about Dune that hasn't already been said? It's really the story of the House of Atreides, and it's, God, I don't even know. Anyway, the world building in this is just some of the most impressive world building you will ever read, just period, hands down, bar none. I have wanted to make a video on Dune and the Dune series, or the Dune books, for basically as long as I've had a channel, and I just can't bring myself to do it. It feels too big. It feels too massive. There are entire channels that have built their entire YouTube empire on just talking about Dune, and like, they'll be like, well, we're going to discuss the axolotl tanks. And then they'll go on for like 20 minutes talking about the axolotls, or the Tleilaxu, or don't even get me started. But it's too big. It's too intimidating, I guess is what I'm saying, for me to talk about. I feel like there's people that are better at it than I would be. And it's been done to death. Anyway, Dune, second greatest series of all time. Although I have some hot takes on Dune, I think. I won't say them here out loud, but, like, I'm one of the few people on the face of the planet that likes the ending to this. Actually, I think I'm one of the few booktubers on the face of the planet, other than the ones who talk about Dune exclusively, that's even finished the series. I think Daniel Green famously got to book 4 and said, yeah, I'll stop there. That's good enough. And so did Moid from Media Death Cult, got to book 4. Everybody gets to book 4 and goes, okay, I guess I don't need 5 and 6. What? Go read 5 and 6. What the f is wrong with you? They're good too, I promise. There is a slight step down in quality after 4, but they are good books. I promise. If you are a Dune fan, you'll like them. You'll have a good time with them. You are allowed to stop after that, though. Don't feel obligated to read any of that Brian Herbert shit. Anyway, I honestly shouldn't say that because I actually haven't read any of the Brian Herbert shit. I probably should, just so I can have a genuine, honest, and appropriate opinion on those. But I did stop at 6. So maybe I'm just a crazy hypocrite, but I feel like Frank Herbert is, the guy. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to stop talking now. Now, on to number 1. And if you have been on this channel before or followed me for any length of time, you probably already know what number 1 is. It's not a surprise. It is The Dark Tower by Stephen King. Now, this one is maybe the most controversial of all of my decisions that I did on this list because, like I said, I think The Book of Sun is all 10 out of 10 books. And even I have reviews of every single one of these on my channel, and they don't get 10s. They some of them don't even come close. I was surprised at how low I ranked some of these when I reread them all, the year before last? It doesn't matter. I love this book in particular, The Gunslinger. I was the kind of person who did not like reading. I didn't like books. Books were lame. Books were for losers. Books were boring. And then when I was 20-ish, right around 2021, I found The Gunslinger, and it changed everything for me. I said, oh, books are good. Books can be awesome. I like this. It broke reading wide open for me. And I just burned through the entire series, and I never looked back. And this is one of those ones that has the most perfect opening. And once you've followed all the way through the story, and it has the most perfect ending of any book, series, anything that I have ever read in my entire life. And that's kind of hilarious coming from an author as notoriously bad with endings as Stephen King is. I don't think he's as bad at endings as the memes seem to act like he is. But let's not split hairs here. He does have a reputation for not sticking the landing. Anyway, and as far as I'm concerned, this is the greatest, most perfect ending of anything ever. And when I say ending, I mean at least as far as that like coda on the end of it. If you've read it, you know what I mean. That was the most satisfying and perfect conclusion to a series as wonderful and as epic as this. And I just have so much love and so much nostalgia for this series. Now, I guess I should say, because I've described all the rest of them instead of just gushing about my love story or my love for it, I guess I should say Roland is a gunslinger. He is traveling through this world where all universes are held together by one central linchpin that is the Dark Tower. That Dark Tower, then, the magic that maintains it and holds it up is failing. That Dark Tower is failing. And if the Dark Tower fails and Dark Tower falls, all existence will cease to exist. And Roland is going to travel to this tower and attempt to save all realities, not just one, not just two, the entire multiverse. Everything that's ever existed is held up by this one central nexus, and he's going to travel to it and maybe save it and maybe save everything else at the same time. It is 7 books of some of the greatest character-driven narratives you will ever see. There's some missteps along the way. There's some books that are better than others. There are stories that you don't really care about. There are stories that you will get so invested in, you won't know what to do with yourself when you're done reading it. It is just some of the most delicious writing that you will see, and some of the most ambitious writing, just in the sense of ideas, which is another reason why there's so many missteps in the journey, because he reaches so hard for something that he might not fully grasp it, or he might not grasp your attention while doing it. Some things he'll reach for and he'll even execute, and you'll be like, you lost me a little bit on that one, King. But you can't say after reading it that he didn't go there. Holy shit. Anyway, that's my favorite book series ever written. I know all those books aren't 10 out of 10, but they mean so much to me, and that journey meant so much to me. And just the feelings that I get when I think back on the books and on reading them far outshines anything else that I've ever read. Anyway, as always, everybody, the link for my Patreon's in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.